So, we are now officially in Donald J. Trump International Airport. How do you guys feel about this name change?
I resent that the name is on every institution that we have, this included.
I think the efforts and the funds are better spent helping people than glorifying the president.
I think it's disgusting, ridiculous, pompous, and a lot of other bad things.
How does it make you feel when you think about the fact that your airport now is named after the president?
It makes me sick every time I even see the sign on 95.
It is the moment virtually no one was waiting for, and the latest egotistical grift we all expected. Starting today, Florida's Palm Beach International Airport is renamed the President Donald J. Trump International Airport. That is unprecedented. The first ever airport named for a president still in office. It's also the subject of two separate lawsuits, and it sparked calls for Congress to ensure that the Trump family doesn't profit off the name change in violation of the Constitution. Today, NPR reports that a Trump Organization spokesperson says Trump and his family, quote, will not receive any royalty, licensing fee, or financial consideration whatsoever from the airport renaming. But at the center of concerns is the Trump Organization's unprecedented move to register multiple trademarks for the airport's new name. Meaning, as the New York Times recently explained, quote, the Trumps won't profit from airport-branded merchandise sold on site, but the agreement doesn't prevent them from profiting off such items sold elsewhere. It also gives the Trump family control over any biographical material presented at the airport or on airport materials. And it requires the airport to pick a vendor to provide any branded merchandise from a list approved by the Trump family business. We are back with Michael and with James. James, the Trump org filed 3 different trademarks: President Donald J. Trump International Airport, Donald J. Trump International Airport, and DJT. Can the family make money off of this?
They can absolutely make money off of it. And I think that the devil here is in the details, which is to say this is a carefully crafted agreement. And what it reminds me of, Alicia, is the deal for the Qatari jet, right? Oh, it's going to go to the library when it's done. It's not actually by the way, nothing is free when it goes to the head of the United States. So, yes, they can make money. This agreement says that they can't make money off of merchandise sold, as you said, on site. They can absolutely make money off of merchandise sold off-site, outside the airport. It also has approved vendors. So if you don't think that Donald Trump, if the airport wants to sell something on-site that is branded as DJT, that is branded with one of those 3 trademarks, the airport can sell that as long as the Trump administration isn't making money directly from the sale. But the airport and the state, which is what this effectively is because it's a county-owned airport and the state had to pass legislation to approve this, if they sell merchandise, that merchandise must be manufactured by Trump-approved vendors. If there's anyone out there in our audience at this point who doesn't believe that he will get kickbacks from those vendors, they have not been paying attention. So, yes, they can make money. And the other way they can make money is it says from merchandise. It does not specify services. So establish a Donald J. Trump lounge in the Donald J. Trump airport and charge for lounge access. Now, let's be honest. Relative to making billions of dollars off of crypto while president, this is small change. But it fits the pattern.
Well, and also part of what is different here is if you don't want a part in the cryptocurrency, you don't need to. You don't want a part of Trump RX, you don't need to have a part of it. There are lots of folks who don't like Donald J. Trump who are going to need to fly in and out of that airport. There is no avoiding it. At which point does this become an emoluments issue?
Well, I think it's an emoluments issue. The problem is, and this is, I rarely speak in emotional terms on programs. As somebody who cares deeply about the Constitution, the emoluments clause is one of the biggest missed opportunities by this Supreme Court ever. Trump 1.0, we were concerned about the foreign emoluments clause as opposed to the domestic emoluments clause. We were concerned about heads of foreign countries and foreign interests paying for hotel rooms. The Supreme Court had an opportunity to make the emoluments clause robust. They passed on that opportunity, and the reason that they passed, or at least the way they dodged it, is to say that the case became moot, which is to say Presidents outlast lawsuits. If we cared deeply about the Constitution, we would care deeply about the emoluments clause. The founders put two of them in the Constitution, a foreign emoluments clause, a domestic emoluments clause. And because of Donald Trump 1.0, plus the Supreme Court, plus everything we've seen in 2.0, they effectively do not exist except on the parchment of the Constitution itself.
Michael Feinberg, listen, a lot of this, Trump chooses to slap his name on things, and he does that with I don't know what authority. In this case, it was Governor Ron DeSantis who allowed this to happen, pushed it through. So there are other people carrying his waters, and as alarming as the grift is, I also think it's notable, this idea that he is going to get to choose what biographical material is shared, given the project that he and his administration have been conducting since the beginning of their first administration of rewriting American history.
Yeah, look, there are a lot of policy and legal and even philosophical issues with what's going on here, but I don't want us to lose sight of how on the most fundamental level, it's just stupid. This is just gauche and obnoxious. This is the sort of behavior that, like in a Scott Fitzgerald novel, the author would have the antagonist do to set up a counterpoint to the actual hero's general sober-minded reflection and restraint. This is just like a bad nouveau riche character out of a Real Housewives family type behavior. Like, you're the president. Just have some basic dignity. Maybe hold off having a branding strategy until you leave office. Maybe focus on the problems of the country. Like, if you do a good job, you'll get an airport, you'll get an aircraft carrier, you'll get a highway. There's no shortage of things named after good presidents. So maybe just, like, give being a good president the old college try. Just try it on for size and see what happens.
It is time to get down to business. The White House is now praising the launch of something you've never heard of, the Freedom Fuel Network. It now offers gasoline at significantly lower prices. 25 stations just opened up in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. A gallon costs just $3.47. That's down around 40 to 50 cents from the average price in both of those states. The White House says this is being done through a private company and that the administration is not playing a role in it, but that is all they're saying. So let's bring in Ron Insana, MS Now business analyst and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack, and Max Chapkin, Bloomberg Businessweek journalist and host of Bloomberg's Everybody's Business podcast. Okay, that's a huge difference in price. How is this even possible? And I hate to say this, but the fact that it's called the Freedom Fuel Network makes my spidey senses go off of like, what's up?
Well, I think this is more a marketing thing than anything else. This price, $3.47, I think it is, if you are a Trump fan, it is undoubtedly a cool price. 47
If you're not
president.
a Trump fan, if you're any fan, right? If you're any fan driving in New Jersey or Pennsylvania and there's a gas station with cheap gas, you're going to go there.
Hang on. If you look at gas aggregators right now, you'll see that $3.47 is a good price. It is not the only gas station offering $3.47 in the Philadelphia area. Basically every Costco, every BJ's, handful of discounters. It's on the low end of the spectrum, and it is well below the state average. But in terms of the local average, you're talking about slightly lower gas price, maybe a couple of cents lower than the lowest, that you could possibly find, with a kind of Trump angle. The big question for me is, who owns this private company? And is there any consideration being given for Donald Trump marketing it, aggressively via the White House Twitter handle, his own Truth Social, and so on?
Dr. Insana, what's your take on this thing?
Well, I mean, what's really interesting to me, Steph, and not just the pricing and the kind of really opaque nature of this program, but there are as many as 190,000 gas stations in the United States. When you count convenience stores and small local independent stations, that 25 station number is literally a drop in the bucket. And so it's not something that's widespread. It'll have some impact in certain areas of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, but this is not the answer to the problem that we have. And as long as this war goes on, as long as the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is now only 19 million barrels above its lowest level since 1983, we have an oil problem. So cutting the price of gasoline in a select few stations is really not going to benefit the vast majority of drivers, some of whom now we're reading are cutting out their summer vacations because costs are simply too high.
I also want to know who's behind these businesses. How did they come to be? New topic, though. Let's talk about Kalshi. Everybody knows Kalshi at this point. The online prediction market failed to stop the state of New York for now regulating it like a typical gambling site. Obviously, Kalshi is appealing the ruling. You know, we have seen several factions try to make sure there's no state regulations on these betting markets. They failed to do it here. Of course, Don Jr. is associated with this company. How big of a deal is it?
Well, I think it's a pretty big deal insofar as, you know, gambling has always been a state-regulated enterprise. What's really interesting in New York is we have 3 casinos being built here, one of which is right near Citi Field and it will be run by Steve Cohen, who owns the New York Mets. So there is a lot of internal competition in the state for the right to gamble, whether it's on site or whether it's on your phone. And so there's a real battle going on here, not only between the federal government and the states, but between the operators of casinos and then the operators of all these other gambling sites. Kalshi says it's not. It says it's an exchange, that it's not a gambling site. But the vast majority of transactions that take place on some of these sites, Polymarket and Kalshi, involve sports betting. So this is something that's going to play out through state legislatures across the country, you know, certainly in Nevada, New York, and other areas where casinos are being built out right now. That is a potent challenge, I think, possibly to what the state will ultimately decide.
And, of course, it's Kalshi and Polymarket. Some states, I mean, Minnesota banned them for this very reason. They're making sports bets. This is not just about prediction markets.
Yeah, it's something like 80%, I believe, of the action on these sites is sports bets. And the other thing is, I mean, there's a legal question. There's a regulatory question. Is this gambling? Is it a market? Anyone who uses these sites knows what it is. The way that they are promoting this, the way that they are used, it is pretty indistinguishable from a user experience from using FanDuel. The main difference is that they're unregulated. I mean, Kalshi and Polymarket say they're regulated by the CFTC, which regulates commodities, but the CFTC has not issued any, formal regulations on sports betting. So they're effectively self-certifying these bets. There's no age limit. 21 is the age limit for most sports betting. On Kalshi, it's 18. You have lots of issues. Finally, what they say is that, this is better, and they're even running ads about this. This is better because you're betting against other people. The thing is, the people you're betting against are often sophisticated, like Wall Street hedge funds and traders, these professional market makers. And when you look at the aggregated numbers on losses, most people who use these sites are losing money. This is not some kind of way to invest money. It's gambling for most people.
A few months ago at the NBA All-Star Weekend, I interviewed on a stage the CEOs of Kalshi, Polymarket, FanDuel, and DraftKings. Do you know why? Because they're all in the exact same business. Yesterday, Ron, the president called Iranian leaders scum. And you know who else he called that? People who are trying to regulate prediction markets. The people who are trying to regulate prediction markets to protect the average consumer out there. The president called scum. And, of course, I mentioned it, Don Jr. He's an advisor to both of these companies. How is that? How is the president potentially putting his thumb on the scale going to impact what happens with these regulations? Because, again, he is the federal government. He is not the state government.
Yeah, but I think we know how this works out. He's been putting the thumb on a scale for a wide variety of different industries, as you and I just discussed a couple of days ago. And so the Commodity Futures Trading Commission has turned a blind eye to so many different conflicts of interest. They're presumably the regulator. Kalshi calls itself an exchange because it's a bet between, if you will, or a trade between two people. You're not playing against the house, as it were, as you would in traditional gambling. But you can rest assured that if the president's putting his thumb on the scale, it will have some influence. And again, the conflicts that we've discussed over the course of the last many weeks with the president's sons being involved, I think we know which way this goes.
I got no time left, but I want to note markets have now been open 8 minutes. They're down just about 50 points, which is not much, considering the situation in Iran doesn't seem to be going away. Max, Ron, thank you both.
All right, folks, let's talk about the latest boost to the president's ego. Palm Beach International Airport has officially been renamed after Donald Trump. In fact, it's called the Donald J. Trump International Airport. MS Now's Alex Habit spoke with travelers to get their take on the new name.
I think it's patently absurd that we're spending taxpayer money to rename an airport after a criminal that's sitting in the White House.
I resent that we have to have every institution in this country being named after Donald Trump.
I think it's ridiculous. I think the efforts and the funds are better spent helping people than glorifying the president.
I think it's disgusting, ridiculous, pompous, and a lot of other bad things. I do not like it at all.
Folks ain't going to be happy flying into that airport.
Yeah, well, two things. One, Palm Beach County has voted for the Democrats the last 4 presidential elections. So the people who use that airport the most, at least the locals, they have a much different political persuasion than the president for the most part. The other thing I will say this is we're here in Washington, D.C. I'm from a generation that still calls the airport DCA. They don't say Reagan. Right? You can say PBI, hold on to it. Yeah. But, you know, this is just the culture of Trump. The one thing, though, we mentioned earlier on the call, this licensing about the name, the Trump family is trying to license the airport name, did some research into it. It doesn't apply to airport vendors or the county sales inside the airport. So if you're an airport vendor out there, go sell the Donald J. Trump airport T-shirt and maybe give the proceeds to, I don't know, free school lunch program, something like that.
It's Luke, you're crazy.
Sweet. Bike lane. What's a good liberal cause?
Bike lanes.
Bike lanes. I'm not. I think I might be against some of the bike lanes, but that's another story.
Don't say that.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I know. They're going to come for me with the pitchforks. I'm about to be the establishment in the next 5 minutes. Look, Donald Trump has tried to name a lot of things after himself, right? This is everything his name has been slapped on in the second term. The Donald J. Trump Bridge in Danbridge, Tennessee, the Donald J. Trump Boulevard in Palm Beach, President Donald J. Trump International Airport, West Palm Beach, Institute of Peace, the JFK Memorial Center for the Performing Arts. He lost that battle. Various banners around D.C. They want to do a battleship. He put his name on the passports. The Trump National Parks Pass. His name has since been removed from the Institute of Peace and the Kennedy Center. Donald Trump is... Luke mentioned DCA. Well, it was named after Reagan after he left office, right? The Kennedy Center named after Kennedy after he was assassinated. Even the airport in Houston, the George W. Bush Airport, named after him after he was in service. Donald Trump is trying to get greatness bestowed on him before he leaves, and he's doing the bestowing. You don't give greatness to yourself. Greatness is bestowed on you, but there's nothing this president has done. He sees his numbers. He knows Michael Steele. He knows they're not going to give it to him, so he's trying to shove it down our throats.
Well, they're not going to give it to him, and on a lot of these things, his name is going to be coming off when he's gone. This is, as one of the folks in the interview said, this is to appease him. It's being done by sycophants who don't want the wrath of Trump on them, and so they give him what he wants. But at the end of the day, you can slap your name on whatever the hell you want. It doesn't mean we like you. It doesn't mean we even want you in as president. What it says is you're the guy whose name is on everything. That's all it says.
Fresh off the NATO summit this week, Donald Trump has plunged America back into a war with Iran. Gas prices are once again on the rise. Inflation is still way too high. Oh, and today, home prices in the United States hit an all-time high. So that's a lot going on. Don't worry, everyone, because the Trump administration and his crack economic team are on the case. They're hard at work, clearly. In fact, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent rushed back from the NATO summit, flew directly to Tennessee to handle one of those top priorities in this country.
We gather along one of the great highways that binds our nation from coast to coast. Now, above the waters of Lake Douglas, the name of the president who puts the American people first. There is no one more deserving of it than Donald J. Trump. From this day forward, every driver that encounters this bridge will see that it bears his name.
Yep, that was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent today, dedicating a bridge in Tennessee to his boss, Donald Trump. And honestly, even calling it a bridge is kind of generous for that humble stretch of infrastructure you see there right on your screen. But those kind of ego-stroking tributes really do seem to be the #1 priority for Trump and his allies these days. Their focus seems to be slapping his name on everything they can get their hands on. And that little bridge in Tennessee wasn't the only thing that got branded with the Trump name today, because today the name of the Palm Beach Airport was officially changed to the President Donald J. Trump International Airport. Now, typically lawmakers wait until a president is out of office before dedicating an airport to them. There are other presidents who had airports dedicated to them. But I guess giving Trump his own special airport was a priority in making him feel like a special boy while he's in office. And it's not really a surprise, though, that some passengers, well, were less than thrilled.
I think it's patently absurd that we're spending taxpayer money to rename an airport after a criminal that's sitting in the White House.
I resent that we have to have every institution in this country being named after Donald Trump.
I think it's ridiculous. I think the efforts and the funds are better spent helping people than glorifying the president.
I think it's disgusting, ridiculous, pompous, and a lot of other bad things. I do not like it at all.
And a lot of other bad things. I love that part. Now, despite all of the crises facing this country, many of them Trump's own making, he is the president after all, he has made it clear that the thing he cares about most are his own vanity projects. Putting his name on buildings, building himself a new ballroom, spending all his time and your money on gaudy, overpriced, and unnecessary beautification projects in Washington, D.C. No detail is too small. And if you watch this show, you know that we have tried over and over and over again to show you how obsessed he is with this stuff. We've played you small clips of his very lengthy diatribes about his ballroom and his reflecting pool and his new White House walkway. But it's really hard to demonstrate with short sound bites the totality of just how much of his time and energy he devotes to these things. But lucky for us, the Washington Post finally found a way to really illustrate what's going on here and the totality. In a new analysis, the Post measured how many days out of every month Donald Trump has mentioned his beautification and construction projects. They found that Trump's focus on these projects has increased over time. We've all seen that. He mentioned his beautification and construction projects 4 out of every 5 days during the month of June. That's 80% of the days last month, just in case you're not a mathematician. Look at that chart there. I mean, for context, he talks about those projects more frequently than he mentions healthcare or China or wages. In fact, he talks about his pet projects about as often as he talks about inflation, which is the #1 issue for most voters. Now, for the last few months, the Trump administration has been claiming that the reason they were focusing so many resources on these projects was to get the Capitol ready for the nation's 250th birthday on the 4th of July. And now that that holiday has come and passed, I am guessing you will not at all be shocked to learn that these projects have not stopped. In fact, there's been scaffolding around the north portico of the White House for more than a week now. And today, that scaffolding was covered with tarps, hiding the building's iconic columns. Now, the White House says that this is all part of some sort of routine maintenance. Okay. I worked for 2 presidents and never saw any kind of routine maintenance done on the north portico that required covering the whole thing in a tarp. Now, that aside, the backstory here is pretty important because back in March, the Washington Post reported that Trump's hand-picked head of the Federal Arts Commission proposed replacing those columns with a more ornate style favored by Trump, a style Trump has used in many of his own properties and one he handpicked for his new Eat Sweet Swing ballroom. Now, at the time of that reporting, the White House said that while Trump prefers those columns, there are no plans to change the existing columns outside the White House. But now those columns are undergoing some kind of construction, and we don't know what it is, and we can't see what it is. Today, we also learned that Trump has accelerated his plans to build a new helipad at the White House, making crews work around the clock and spending an extra $875,000 so that it will be finished in time for a visit from China's President Xi. That's according to contractors' records obtained by the Post. And that additional $875,000 to get this rush project done is really about Trump's penchant for showing off his new toys for other world leaders.
Charlie Sykes and political reporter and author Molly Ball are back with me. All right, Charlie, let me get this straight. Iran gets sanction relief and Americans get freedom fuel, which I got to note, not the cheapest gas in the South Jersey suburb of Philadelphia, where these stations are popping up. At least 2 nearby stations started their prices 2 cents cheaper per gallon. What do you make of this gimmick, Charlie?
Well, my first reaction was, what the hell? I mean, so we're going to have now the government-run or government-affiliated gas stations. It is not hard for any of us sitting here to imagine what the reaction among conservatives and Republicans would have been if, say, Barack Obama or Joe Biden had rolled out this sort of thing. I mean, and also the fact that it is so kind of cheesy, the idea of freedom fuel. But keep in mind that it was Donald Trump who just a few weeks ago was saying that if this war was not ended, it would lead to global economic catastrophe, and saying that he did not want to be remembered the way Herbert Hoover was remembered. He is the one who laid out what the economic consequences of a renewed war would be. And yet here we are, and I'm not sure that calling, having freedom fries or freedom fuel is going to distract from the consequences of that.
Well, especially, Molly, but just to underline the point Charlie made, the president is testing a new midterm message. It is not about affordability. Watch.
Communism is the exact opposite of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's death, tyranny, and the pursuit of evil. Communism is a loser, and it always will be. Our warriors did not fight communism on battlefields across the world, only to have that menace rear its ugly head right back here in America. We're not going to let it happen.
So he's railing against communism, but he also wants to have government-run fuel stations. I mean, help me understand where communism, Molly, fits in all this. I get that it's a boogeyman. I get that it's sort of, to him, a vibe, maybe less than an ideology or a practice. But it's impossible to not see the differential between what he's saying and what he's doing.
Well, from what I understand, these gas stations are not government run or funded or don't have any formal affiliation with Trump or the White House or the government. It's just sort of a Trump fan, and the White House has embraced it and is promoting it. That being said, I think 2 things. First of all, it shows you how aware Trump is that this is a huge vulnerability for him, that gas prices, and he knows it, are a major pain point for Americans going into the midterms, and they're a huge vulnerability for him, and it has been hurting him politically since this war began and the prices started going up. And now that he's called off the ceasefire and prices are going to go up again, and it is still the summer travel season, that pain point remains. But I think, second of all, these are not government run, but I wouldn't be that surprised if Trump did roll out government run gas stations, right? He's someone who is not very interested in the sort of traditional fiscally conservative ideology that says government and markets should be separate. He's done a number of things, taking shares in companies, industrial policy, tariffs, so on, to indicate that he is not that kind of traditional fiscally conservative Republican. And I think, frankly, he is more in step with the public than some of those Republicans might be in this moment, when people are dissatisfied with the economy and really want to see more government intervention to help them make ends meet.
Charlie, I appreciate that Molly corrected where I misspoke there, because an anti-communist message, it's ironic given the administration's unusual habit of taking government stakes in major companies, Intel, yes, U.S. Steel, Vulcan Elements, just to name a few. Is it possible this president has more in common with communists or communism than he may realize?
Well, the reality is that communism and socialism actually mean something. They mean the government control of industry or the means of production. When Donald Trump uses communism, he just basically means people I don't like, things I don't like. Now, by the way, I mean that doesn't mean that there are not some far left extremists that he's going to try to link the Democratic Party to. But to your point, if you do have the government taking stakes in companies, that seems like kind of a classic definition of socialism or socialism adjacent. Here is a president who, may wrap himself in capitalist values, but really doesn't practice the free market. I mean, this is a market that he's very, very transactional. He operates by fear or favor. He picks the winners and the losers. All the things that conservative free market advocates opposed up until about 5 minutes ago. So I think that's the larger picture, is his involvement in the marketplace, his desire to put the thumb of government on, in terms of the, who succeeds and who does not succeed. And as you point out, taking government ownership of private companies. And again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but it is not hard to imagine if Barack Obama would have said, yes, we're going to take, massive ownership shares in these companies, not just as a temporary basis, but ongoing, what the reaction would have been. But again, this is going to be a rhetorical thing that we're going to hear through the midterms. You can tell that he really likes this. He really likes, referring to his opposition as communist. How it plays, who knows?
Donald Trump's approval ratings continue to hit record lows. 60% of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's handling of the economy, while only 33% approve, his lowest approval rating ever in a Marist poll. After Donald Trump said the U.S.-Iran ceasefire was over, that was his word, his phrase was, it's over, gas prices immediately rose 5 cents overnight to $3.84, 86 cents higher per gallon than it was before Donald Trump's war on Iran began. According to the recent Marist poll, 34% of Americans say current gas prices are a major strain on their household budget. 44% say it's a minor strain, and just 22% say it's no strain at all. On social media, Donald Trump announced that gas prices are going down because someone, possibly a mysterious unnamed billionaire Trump supporter, has decided to create what the White House is calling the Freedom Fuel Network. Donald Trump announced the Freedom Fuel Network will be lowering gas prices at 25 Freedom Fuel stations across the greater Philadelphia area. This retailer is taking the lead, and others should follow. No others have followed, and the White House refuses to say who the retailer is, who is willing to lose money on the sale of gasoline for Donald Trump. There are 160,000 gas stations in America, and some secret friend of Donald Trump's is temporarily lowering slightly prices at 25 gas stations, all of them in the same area around Philadelphia. Joining us now is Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He's the top Democrat on the House Budget Committee, and he's a member of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman Boyle, first of all, have you found that $3.47 gas in the Philadelphia area?
Well, good to be with you as always, Lawrence. And I understand that one of these stations is apparently a few blocks away from where I live. So I appreciate Donald Trump, for the first time in the 6 years he's been president, doing something nice for me personally. But I would remind people that had he just not started his absurd war of choice in Iran, we would go back to paying $2.98 a gallon, which was the national average just 4.5 months ago. So $3.47 is better when you're used to paying over $4. But of course, it was under $3 a gallon before his stupid war that he has now lost repeatedly.
And there's Donald Trump tonight saying, I don't know. He doesn't even know where we are in this war. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. So no one knows what's going to happen to gas prices next and all the other prices that then get pegged to fuel costs.
Well, you know, I believe that he has successfully ended this war 17 times on my count, according to his social media. But if we just take a step back for a second and think of where we've been over the last just under 2 years, inflation was coming down every single month during 2024. We were almost back to 2%. And Donald Trump has done two major things since then. First, the Trump tariff taxes, which have increased costs for the American consumers and increased cost writ large for this nation. And then on top of that, this disastrous war in Iran, which of course has raised fuel prices as well as other costs. Combined, inflation is again through the roof, and it is specifically because this time, not because of coming out of a pandemic, it is specifically because of the policies of Donald J. Trump.
As we go forward with the affordability issue in what is now the congressional campaigns for this year, do you see anything changing the dynamics of that issue as we move toward November?
If anything, the issue seems to be even more palpable today because things are getting worse and not better. It's remarkable when you think about that Donald Trump has a trifecta at this moment. He could actually pass something literally this upcoming week when we return to session that would bring down costs for the American people. Instead, House Republicans are so dysfunctional that for 2 consecutive weeks, Mike Johnson has had to cancel House session because he literally can't get a basic rule, essentially a motion to proceed to pass. This is something that was always an afterthought for most of the last several decades, indeed for most of congressional history. So unfortunately, things, I believe, will get a lot worse on this issue before they get better.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Frequent flyers can say goodbye to PBI and hello to DJT. Palm Beach International Airport was officially renamed the President Donald J. Trump International Airport today, after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a law to rename the airport in the president's honor. Our own Alex Tabbitt asked people there today what they think of this change.
I think it's patently absurd that we're spending taxpayer money to rename an airport after a criminal that's sitting in the White House.
I think it's disgusting, ridiculous, pompous, and a lot of other bad things. I do not like it at all.
I resent that the name is on every institution that we have, this included. I resent that we have to have every institution in this country being named after Donald Trump.
Of course, dozens of airports bear the names of former presidents, but those honorary distinctions have never before been given to a president still holding office, and they have also never been trademarked. The Trump Organization filed 3 trademarks through the private company that manages the president's intellectual property. For DJT, President Donald J. Trump International Airport and Donald J. Trump International Airport. All are still pending approval, raising questions about how the president could potentially benefit financially. Tim is back with us. So you had a Trump Organization spokesperson telling NPR that trademark activity is, quote, normal practice. Does it strike you as normal?
How would we know if it's normal? Because no other sitting president has had this opportunity. Not only have roadways and bridges and airports been named after presidents after they have office, I think in almost every case they've passed away. So it's a long stretch of time had passed before either the president or anyone in his family could have tried to make money off of that opportunity. So there is no normal practice here. You know, when his administration says the things that he is doing are not unprecedented, other presidents have done them, blah, blah, it's hokum. Because he's grifting at every moment he can. And I think one of the ways they got around some of the restrictions in Miami that came around on the airport was they weren't allowed to vend Trump-branded bling and swag in the airport itself, but anyone who sold it would have to only sell licensed goods from the Trump family that they would get essentially a cut of the action for. So although they're not going to run the stores, they're still going to benefit from the flow that comes out of Trump-branded merchandise.
Wanting to put his name on everything is not new. Can we pull up that full screen? You got the Trump RX, Trump Gold cards, Trump accounts, Trump National Park passes, Trump signature on our currency. Like, we're accustomed to seeing the name everywhere. I think part of what makes this story interesting is the fact that Governor Ron DeSantis was willing to do this.
Even after Trump humiliated him, like
Yes.
so many of the people he's trounced, Marco Rubio's another one. You know, what Trump has done to his own party is he's made them all completely acquiescent. The fact that he needs his name on everything is yet another, I think, indicator of how emotionally warped he is, because it's endless. You know, his need to constantly refill attention and put his name anywhere he can see within reach or beyond it's remarkable in terms of what it says about his own security, emotional security and sense of himself.
Just real quick on the DeSantis point of this, renaming the airport is estimated to cost Florida taxpayers $5.5 million. The plan's sponsor says the new airport revenue will cover that cost. You just add it to this list that is up on our folks' screen of the ways in which taxpayers are being asked to pay for all of his vanity projects.
While we cut welfare benefits and health care access for needy Americans who should have a path into the middle class, he's going around and using taxpayer money to essentially gild his own ego.
So interesting to me listening to that sound that Alex Tabbitt was able to secure in Florida. People are annoyed. People don't like it. Tim O'Brien, thank you for spending so much time with me.